This is Jonathan Aggie of Fearful Pro Boxing Fans, joined by Dan, Rafael. Let's talk about some news today that Eddie Hearn says he's had a bit of contact on email with Shelly Finkel for the first time in years about a future fight between Joshua and Deontay Wilder. Your reaction to that, is that some step in the right direction, even tentatively?
I mean, anytime there's communication, it never hurts. I don't think it's the first time in years, because I spoke to Shelly Finkel maybe a week ago, and he had said to me in the days or the week or two before Deontay had his fight against Robert Helenius that Eddie had contacted him about wanting to talk about that fight. And Shelly said to me that his response to Eddie was, I'm interested to talk about it. Let's definitely talk about it. Let's wait until Deontay's fight with Helenius is over and then circle back with you after that's over. Obviously, that was a couple of weeks ago. Wilder scored a spectacular first-round knockout against Helenius. And I guess this is now Eddie circling back to him about the prospect of that fight. I've talked to Shelly Finkel a number of times since the Deontay Wilder knockout against Helenius. He has said to me on a number of occasions, that's the fight that they want. As a fan, I wanted to see that fight for years. I wanted to see that when it was them both being champions. It would have been for the undisputed title. They were both undefeated. There had been talks on multiple occasions between the sides and for different reasons. And you can lay blame perhaps at the feet of both sides here and there that it did not happen. And so even though they're not champions anymore and they're not undefeated anymore, and they've shown their vulnerabilities by being knocked out and suffering losses, you know what? It's still a great matchup. It's still a very exciting fight. It's a fight, I think, that title or no title, if you're a boxing fan, I don't think there's any way you wouldn't want to see that fight. It's a very interesting matchup. And like you mentioned, if Eddie, in fact, reached out to Shelly, communication is never a bad thing. The only way you can make fights is you communicate with the other side. So I'm going to reserve judgment on whether it happens or not, because as all the different examples that we've just been talking about these significant fights that have not happened, we can cite chapter and verse on all the stuff that goes on that are reasons why these major fights don't happen. So I'm not going to get my hopes up. You show me a signed contract, send me a press release, show me a photo op of them standing together at a news conference, and then maybe I'll believe it. And I'll believe it more when the bell rings. So I'm not going up and down that emotional roller coaster. We've been down that road way too many times, especially with some of those matchroom fights that Eddie loves to talk about that don't happen. So I'm happy if they're having conversations about it, but show me the money, as they say, and let me see when it's really done.
Dan, obviously one fight that is definitely happening December 3rd here in the UK, Fury against Derek Chisora. Now, obviously, Frank Warren has justified why they couldn't get certain opponents. I know there was WBC ranked opponents that some people suggested. In your opinion, is Chisora the best name available in terms of a dancing partner for Fury in a 60,000 seater stadium? Was there anyone else you feel could have stepped in other than Derek Chisora that was available?
You can go down the rankings. I don't have them here in front of me, but I mean, there's plenty of heavyweights that would be somewhere in that top 15 of the WBC that would drop everything they're doing and run to a world championship opportunity. So look, I appreciate Frank's position. I'm not anti-Frank Warren by any means. I like Frank. We've gotten along. I've known Frank over 20 years. But Frank's a promoter. His job is to sell the event. Obviously, he's going to say that this is a great fight and fans should embrace it and it was what they could get done. But no, I don't think it's a very good fight. I'm not interested in it, to tell you the truth. I love Tyson Fury as a heavyweight champion. He's a tremendous fighter. He's a great personality. But he's another guy that promised a lot and delivered a little. And I just don't think that a Derek Chisora fight is worthy of the fight. Now, if he wants to give his buddy Derek Chisora a payday, good for him. But that doesn't mean we have to buy that stuff. I mean, look, I love boxing and I cover boxing. It's how I make my living. I'll watch the fight. I'll write about the fight. But I'm not enthusiastic about it at all. If there are 50,000 diehards that are going to show up at that stadium and watch the fight, good for them. I don't necessarily believe that 50,000 number. If you go on any of the third-party ticket sellers, you can find any number of tickets and thousands of tickets that are available. It's a fake sellout, in my opinion, the way a lot of, and I'm not singling this fight out. There's a lot of fights that the promoters love to hype up as sold out or huge crowds, and huge swaths of the tickets are with third-party brokers, and we all know how that goes. So, look, I'm cynical on this one. Fury wants to have a tune-up fight before he hopefully fights Usyk for the undisputed title in 2023. I've never had a problem with the heavyweight champion staying busy and taking a fight, but I think they could have done a lot better in terms of a guy that was worthy of a title shot than Derek Chisora. He lost however, what, 2 or 3 in a row, and then he had life and death with Pulev, a fight that I thought, could have gone either way. Is that enough to warrant a title shot? Count me out, Daddy.
And just closing off, obviously the big news in the UK over the last few weeks.
Let me guess.
Go on.
Conor Benn.
You got it. Right in one. Conor Benn, obviously developing story seemingly every day. There's something new. But the latest thing is that Eddie Hearn believes that, and Conor Benn believes that it's the subject of contamination. What have you made of sort of the latest developments? Obviously, Conor also revealed a further failed test, which wasn't known until he mentioned it in the interviews he did with a couple of written journalists. So what have you made of the recent developments, Dan?
Well, the second failed test was something that myself and I know other journalists had been hearing about. I've been hearing about it for the last several weeks, and I'll be honest, I was trying to ferret out the information. I could not nail that down. So, Conor came clean and talked about it to one of those other outlets, good for them. But for me, it didn't come as a surprise because I've been hearing about that failed test for a while, and that just throws more negativity towards what he's been dealing with in terms of the other tests that were found by VADA that caused the fight to be called off with Eubank in the first place. So now he's got multiple failed tests. I'm not sure what his excuse is at this point. I mean, he still, to my knowledge, hasn't asked for the B sample, which we all know when it gets tested, it's going to come back the same as the A sample anyway, unless there's a minuscule chance it'll be different. I mean, time and time again, when B samples are tested, they're the same as the A sample. So, Conor Benn's got a lot of explaining to do. I'd like to understand, what his storyline is. He doesn't seem to be able to keep the story straight. Go from the beginning with the first failed test, take us through what happened to the second failed test and the cancellation of the fight, and explain yourself, because so far he hasn't done it. If he says it was there and he didn't know about it, and I've said this before, well, how'd it get there? Did one of your people in your camp give it to you? A buddy of yours, a nutritionist, a strength trainer, somebody you met on the street? I mean, how did it get there? That's an important thing to find out, because what people have to understand is the reason he's in trouble, it's whether he took it on purpose or he didn't take it on purpose. It's the mere fact that it's there is what's causing the trouble. It's not a matter of how it got there. It's just that it's there. And I've said this before. It's the concept of strict liability. You're responsible for what's in your body, however it got there. Whether you took it, whether somebody gave it to you, whether it got there by accident, whatever, it's your responsibility. And that's what he has to deal with. And as far as Eddie talking about contamination, I mean, look, they're trying to take anything they can, throw it against the wall and see if it sticks. I'm waiting for an actual investigation. I'm waiting for the B sample to be tested. I'm waiting for them to actually sit down, do the authorities that are involved with regulation, do a bona fide hearing, and let's see what has to be said about this. The one thing I'll say, though, is that I'm actually kind of shocked at the amount of attention this has gotten in Britain. I understand it's a big deal because it was a big fight, and we've seen this happen in the past. But at some point, while people go through the process that we're talking about, the investigation, all that business, things usually die down. This Conor Benn thing has been raging for weeks. It's just mind-boggling how big it is. Now, maybe it's because there haven't been as many failed tests in Britain as there are in the United States, unfortunately. But we've seen it time and again. A guy fails a test, a girl fails a test. They have the hearing in front of whatever the local commission is that had that, like taking Nevada, for example. They put them on the agenda. They go through the process. They talk to the commission. There's discovery, whatever. It takes a few months usually to go through the process, and at some point they mete out a punishment, and it's whether it's a 6-month suspension, a year-long suspension, maybe they have a license revocation, etc. And everybody moves on with their life. The athlete has to then try to figure out how to get themselves back in good stead. Conor Benn, this just is like the story that will never end.
That's what I wanted to ask you, Dan. Obviously, Oscar Valdez failed a VADA test on fight week, and his fight went ahead. What do you see as the difference between that fight and that reaction compared to this situation?
I'm glad that you asked that, because I've been asked that also. There is a major difference in what happened with Valdez compared to what happened with Conor Benn. Let's look at Conor Benn first. He tested positive for a substance that is banned across the board. At no time is it legal to be in your system under VADA rules, under UCOD rules, under WADA rule. It's like banned, period, at any level. Forget about trace amounts or a lot, a little. You can't have it, period, in competition, out of competition, whatever. If you get caught with it in your system, you're in violation. It's a failed drug test. So he had that with the VADA test, and that's the bottom line. In the case of Valdez, and I am not making excuses for Oscar Valdez or whatsoever, make the mistake that I'm in any way defending Oscar Valdez's positive test. But if you go by the rules that are used in the area where that fight took place, in that tribal commission in Arizona, they go by the WADA rules, not the VADA rules, even though they signed up for VADA testing. My opinion was once he failed the VADA test, the fight should have been off. However, the reason why it was allowed to go on was because the substance that he tested positive for, this is very important, under the WADA code, it is not permissible in competition, which is defined as, I believe, within 48 hours, or maybe it was 24 hours before your competition, whether it's a boxing match, a track and field meet, whatever sport you're competing in. VADA rules prohibit that substance in competition and out of competition. And when Oscar Valdez popped positive in the VADA test, he did so out of competition. So under the VADA code, he was in violation. Under the WADA code, which was what was used by that tribal commission in Arizona, because he tested positive out of competition, meaning weeks before his competition, not within the 24-hour or 48-hour time period, it was viewed as not a violation. So therefore, that commission ruled that because he tested positive for a substance we allow out of competition, but not in competition, he was allowed to compete because the VADA test was failed out of competition. So it's a little complicated, but it's not that confusing. So again, they signed up for VADA testing. If you sign up for VADA testing, you should follow their rules. If their rules say you can't use this substance ever, then you should not have been allowed to fight. They were going by the rules of that local commission. He tested positive for a substance that commission allows out of competition, and his failed test for VADA was out of competition. So as far as that commission was concerned, he didn't have a failed test. You were allowed to use that substance out of competition, and he did. Now, he claims he didn't take it on purpose and all that other stuff, but even still, the test failure was weeks before the fight, out of competition. Under their rules, no harm, no foul as far as they were concerned. So that's a difference. The Benn substance was something that nobody allows at any time in or out of competition. Y'all got that? There's going to be a quiz.
Dan, thanks for your time today. We'll have to see how that situation plays out, but appreciate you jumping on with me today, and I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
I appreciate it. Thank you.